Hi everyone, today I'm going to be showing you how to analyze student assessments. This is part one of a two-part video. So part one is how to analyze assessments, and then part two is filling out what you see on the screen now, an individual literacy plan for a student. So I'll get started on showing you analyzing assessments. There's different areas that need to be assessed to figure out if the student needs help with word recognition and spelling, or if it's more comprehension, or if it's both. And so what I have here is I'm showing you what I do when I sit with any given student and what I guide teachers to do. So first we look at alphabet knowledge and letter formation, and you can find out if the student knows the alphabet and if they are able to form letters by asking them to write the alphabet. And that's what the student did here. I always say, please write in uppercase and in lowercase. So I'll go over these in a second, but first I'm going to show you what I did. I also assess the student in their ability to identify letters when they're in front of them, which is separate from their ability to write them. So you might be able to identify letters but not write them. And then I ask them to give the letter sounds. And if you want to learn how to give this assessment, I have a separate video on that. This one is called the LILS for letter identification, letter sound. Next, I look at, can they spell high frequency words? And there's a list of common irregular high frequency words that's pulled from Fry and Dolch and one other from Carol Davies and Rickham. So we'll look at that. Then I want to see if the student can decode. The best way to tell is by giving them nonsense words. So this is a screener that you can find on Root Literacy Design's website. But this is all jumbled. So you'll see there's digraphs, there's short vowels, there's vowel teams, there's spelling rules like DGE. There's all kinds of stuff going on here. I like to give this one first because it gives me a very good idea of if the student can decode or not. And usually I do what you see I did here is if I see the student is really struggling and they're not able to sound out or read the nonsense words, then I will stop. I don't need to keep going because now I'm at the point where I'm seeing they're struggling with short vowels, they're struggling with letter sounds. So in this case, I stopped and then I gave a more specific decoding screener. And this one is looking at the student's ability to read closed syllables, vowel consonant E syllables, and then compound words that contains closed and vowel consonant E. It also looks at if they are able to do consonants next to each other. We often call those blends. And if they're able to do the welded sounds, and there's some spelling rules in there, like the double L, the floss rule. So these are all beginning concepts. So I pulled that one based on how the student did here. I pulled this one. Because I ended up pulling the assessment that looked at their ability to read words with closed and vowel consonant E, I pulled the same assessment, group one, for spelling. I wanted to see how they could do with spelling for this kiddo. I also gave the assessment Kilpatrick's PAST, phonological awareness screening, and I wanted to see if the student was able to isolate sounds for phonemes and syllables. And then I also gave, this one's free as well, I gave this assessment as well for the DDM for phonemic awareness on the student. And the last thing, I always want to see what it sounds like if the student reads to me. So this student was in third grade when I was doing these assessments. And so I used the QRI to gauge what the student could read and understand on their own. And then I analyzed the QRI to get the student's accuracy, automaticity, and prosody score. So I'm going to go through all of these now and analyze them. And then I'll send a separate video where I show how to take that information and put it into this document here to make a literacy plan for the student an instructional plan. First, we got to go through all of this. All right, I'm going to start with the phonological and phonemic awareness assessment here. So the first thing tested is the student's ability to to hear and isolate syllables. So a 1 means that's correct but not automatic. So the student got all of these correct. 1 was correct but not automatic. Automaticity is 3 seconds or less. And then for the syllable level down here, the student was really struggling. There's actually 3 incorrect and 1 that was not automatic. So what this tells me is the student needs help with isolating syllables, which will help for spelling, especially if we have multisyllabic words that the student needs to spell. We want them to be able to tap the sounds like basin. We want the student to go basin and be able to then hear the sounds in each syllable. Onset and rhyme. This just tells me if the student's able to hear the initial sounds. So we got 1, 2 incorrect. We've got another incorrect down here. I'm going to go to the phoneme level and see what's going on with the phoneme level. And we had 5 out of 6 incorrect. So I stopped there because I felt like I had enough information to form instruction. So what I'm seeing is this student needs help with syllables and with phonemes. And we know that when we're working on phonemes with students that we want them to be able to blend and segment. So that's going to take up a lot of the work that I do with the student. This final assessment here, take this off. Final assessment here for phonemic awareness was looking at if the student could isolate each sound. So they were given these words, so, key, pain, dog, bought, and they had to give the sounds in each one. And then I circled the amount. So has 2 sounds. The student was able to tell me so. Key has 2 sounds. The student was able to tell me k, e. So all of these were correct. All of these were correct except last. The student said there were 3 sounds in last. So he probably did something like asked and kept those 2 together. So there's 1 incorrect here. So that's pretty good, actually. This is looking at the student can hear first sounds. We know that when we are training our ear to be able to hear sounds and words, that we start with the first sound, and then the last sound of the word comes next, and then the medial sounds are the hardest for us to hear. So the first sound was all correct. And this last part for phoneme blending, where the student says the word fast after you say it slowly. So I said ooh, s, and the student had to say the word. The student said moose. So that was 1 incorrect. So this is not too it's not too bad here. Okay. Next, I'm going to look at the student's alphabet knowledge and letter formation. A, B, C, D. I know it's hard to see, but the student put a little line there for E. F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R. That's the S. T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W. Okay, so the student knows the alphabet, so I can check that they have alphabet knowledge. But now I'm looking at, do I have to teach this student any letters? So this is not a capital N. I need to teach the student capital N. That's the only one standing out to me. The C looks like a small c to me. This looks like a capital D instead of a lowercase b. The A needs work for lowercase. This G definitely needs work, and it fell into the S here. It was the student's S, H-I-J. So you'll see here the student did a capital I, capital J, capital K, capital L, capital M. and then erased them and fixed them. So that means they're not automatic. So we need to keep working on I, J, K, L, M. Keep practicing with the student until they're automatic and they don't have to stop and think about how to make those letters. This looks like a capital O. This is a mix of a capital and a lowercase p, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. The V's all over the place. So you also see too that line placement is something the student needs help with. Understanding, this B, for example, should look like this. So we want to teach the student where each letter sits in the line. It's letter formation is, are they making the letters correctly, but also are they sitting in the line correctly? So that will be a goal for that student. All right, next I'm going to look at decoding. Take this off. Okay, so the student said Jat, Chan, tough. The ul sound was dropped. And then self-corrected to fam. So the am, the nasal A next to the M, that is not automatic for the student yet. G, I, guy. So the student needs to learn G says the J sound next to E, I, and Y, so circle that. Stro for stray. So this is the open syllable. Learning when a vowel's at the end, it says its name. D, E, T. So the student just went sound by sound and then said D's. Z, I, G, E. Okay, so the student needs to learn D, G, E says J. Bl, I, like. So a couple things going on here. The student needs the soft sound of C and also needs to work on vowel consonant E. Sk, O-E, SCO-E, so O-Y, vowel team O-Y, through B. Oh, look at that. Student's letter box is still forming, flipping the P's and B's. Okay, so we need to work on that. G, N, A, B. So we need to learn this silent letter for GN. That G is silent. Pull, plume. Okay, went sound by sound, then got it correct. K, carn. Okay, so needs UR. Now I stopped here because this was very laborious for the student, and I was starting to see or get an idea, because vowel consonant E especially showed up, that I had an idea in the scope and sequence where the student was. So I pulled an assessment that really focuses more on closed syllables, words that have blends, and the vowel consonant E. I wanted to see what the student could do there. This has real words and nonsense words as well, so it'll give me clear information regarding if the student is memorizing words or if they're able to decode, and what they do when they get to real words as well. So taught was sound by sound but correct. All of these were correct, but 3 were sound by sound. Sound by sound, but all correct. So when I do the check like that, it means the student went nad and said the word. All right, this one is incorrect. The student said vob for vob. So we had 4 out of 5 correct and 5 out of 5 correct. And it was the short O that showed up. Next, we have advanced closed. So this has blends and some spelling rules and suffixes, S and ES, and also the nasals like an, am. It has ALL, floss rule, digraphs, all kinds of good stuff. So let's see what the student was able to do. Sound by sound, but correct. The student said st, alls, and broke it apart there. So I did the dividing line there to show that. So all of these are correct. Yep. So this is 10 out of 10. Okay. This one, oh, that's showing up again. That's so interesting. So on this assessment here, the student dropped that ending blend sound, the ul, and it's happening again here. Student said huff, as, was. Interesting. So the student is turning a nonsense word into a real word that he knows, and this is often what students do. It's a cueing method. This is what they do when they're memorizers and they can't decode. So I'm just going to flag that because that's a sign that the student memorizes. And he's pulling from words he knows. He knows was has W and A, and he also hears the Z sound maybe. Was. Interesting. So what's going on here? Got it correct, then he read it wrong. So it's not that the student needs teaching in those sounds, but needs help with going back and rereading and blending those sounds and not changing it to a known word. Str, and then stands. Oh, look, it's happening again. He's just making a real word. Wow. Okay, so what's missing from here is that AM, the welded A. Schroff, got correct. Cranch it, he sounded out cranch and then changed it to crunches. So he dropped the ES on that word and then he changed it to a real word. Grass, and then corrected back to grassed. Making real words again. Ib. Oh, look, we have that D and B, and I think, what was it here? Oh, it was the P and the B. So yeah, still forming our letter box. We've got a beginning reader here if that letter box isn't formed and we're still flipping letters. We said swath, and then changed it to swaths. Okay? Sound by sound for jump, and then said swemp. So, and then sounded out rust and said rust. Okay. So these are the things that are showing up as needing explicit teaching. And I'm going to make a note here as well that the student really needs help with blending after reading to put the strand of sounds together and say the word and not change it to a word he knows. That's what he's doing because he's struggling with blending. So he's just saying a word that looks like the word. Okay, so all of these were correct. You can see a lot of labor going into sounding out words right now for this kiddo. Stribes. Okay, so that is the vowel consonant E with a suffix. The student needs to learn to do stribes, stribe, and then the suffix. Now I want to see what the student does with larger words. So we're looking at closed and vowel consonant E for compound words. Excuse me. All right, so anthill kept the TH together, gave the V sound. So what I'm seeing here is a student 1, 2, 3, 4. Wow, this is a lot of labor going into reading these words. So this one is incorrect. Sandlot, riptide, grid, and then ziplock, and then going sound by sound the whole way. Wow. So I want to teach the student how to divide and read multisyllabic words using compound words for sure. Okay. Next up, so that was decoding. Let's see what we've got next. I think it makes sense to look at. Once I got spelling next. So for spelling, it doesn't really matter the order that you look at these, by the way. I just kind of, if they just, read words, I just like to see, it's fresh in my mind what the student needs, so I like to look at it. Next. So for spelling, this is the student's form. The word was camps. The student, that's his A. So he did CANPS. So we're not hearing that sound right there. Band was correct. Foxes, gust, eve, missing that vowel consonant E. Sept for kept. So we need to learn when to use the K for the K sound and the C for the K sound. So this rule here, we use K to spell K before E, I, and Y. Small is correct. Quench is correct. Number 9 was shrill. Oh, that's interesting. Shrill. This student's having a hard time with L's. That showed up 3 times now. You dropped the L in 2 of the decoding when it was at the end of the word, and now he's also not putting it into words here. That's fascinating. So I'm going to circle the LL for the floss rule. I'll teach that. Quit, Q-U-T. So we're missing, actually, this wasn't quit. This was, which one am I on, number 10? That was cute. Wow. That was a student's spelling of cute. Okay, lots going on here. Oh, that's fascinating because the name Q is in the word, and then he heard U, so he put the letter name Q in the U. I bet that's what he did. And it's the vowel consonant E not coming through again. So again, we got to learn when C says the sound, we got to learn the vowel consonant E. All right, number 11 is bikes. Got that right. Put these side by side here. Next is trap. Number 13, lives or lives. I read it both ways form. Number 14, rule. That's rule. That's that L again. Wow. Okay. So I'm going to circle the L and I'm going to circle the U consonant E. Okay. I wonder if he's just memorized this word because it's so common. All right, number 15, go. That's correct. Quick, look, he snuck that U in there. It's not automatic yet. I'm going to circle that just because it's not automatic, and I want to keep practicing it with the student. Stripes, didn't do the E. Vowel consonant E showing up again. And I want to be teaching the student to write the base and then attach the suffix. So to do stripe and then add the S for stripes. Drumstick, got correct. Number 19 was thrown. Vowel consonant E is missing. And that R, the R sound. This is also matching those phoneme assessments I looked at the beginning because those showed that the student was having a hard time hearing blends. And we know that he was hearing initial sounds, but the medial sounds are really difficult. So he's still learning those. And the last one was backside. Look, drop the vowel consonant E again. Okay. So now I've got a pretty clear picture of where this kid is and what's going on for their reading and their spelling. I'm going to look at his letter, the Lil's assessment, the letter identification, letter sounds. Okay, let's see how he did. So these are my notes from when I gave the assessment. He identified capital V as Y and then self-corrected, so that's not automatic yet. He did the same thing where in lowercase where he identified a V as a Y, but then he self-corrected with teacher prompt. That's what that means. Self-correct with, the W slash is with teacher prompt. And the G right here, he needs help with. So the SA means student asked. So he looked at it and he asked me for my help. He couldn't identify it. He said, what's that letter? So I'll just circle it because he doesn't know it. Okay. So sometimes the student's adding the sound. So we say ka, ba, da, ja, wa. So this is me adding that. He said the sound, but he still, he said ba. So when working with the student, I would just correct him and say ba and teach him to clip those sounds. Did not know the soft sound of G, which matched the decoding assessment that was given to him, where he was not able to, look at this, the GI, it showed up there. This is what we want. This is how you know you have good assessments, when you're starting to see patterns and you're starting to see consistency and you're starting to see things show up on more than one thing. That shows you the student really needs it. Does not know the voice sound of TH. Did not know the N sound, and did not know the oo sound for you. Oh, wow. O was said as and then self-corrected. That was the one error that he made when he was reading. He said vob for vob. It was the short O. That makes a lot of sense. So he's still learning that. So I'm going to circle that and keep practicing it with him because it's not automatic yet. And sometimes he's missing it, like showed up here. Okay, 2 more things I have to look at. Almost done. Thanks for hanging in there with me. The last one, second to last one is high frequency words, and I'll show you the QRI with the fluency assessment. So this is also on my website. Wiley Blevins did a lot of work with high frequency words and pulling out from lists what the irregular words are. And so my work is based on Wiley Blevins' work, which is so helpful. So I gave the student just lined paper. I wanted to see how he wrote with given lined paper. And as we know, he needs help with letter formation, staying in the lines. The student would benefit from having larger paper until he has mastered the letter formation. But I always like, he's in third grade. I want to see how he can do with this regular lined paper. So this is in order of this assessment. And to just save us some time, all I did was go through and figure out which ones the student didn't say or didn't write correctly. They didn't read them, they were spelling them. So he was spelling them. So I went through this assessment and I looked at his spelling, and I started to, on this sheet, track what he needed help with. So he spelled wash as wish and then fixed it. Needed help with the TH for there. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, so I mean, it's as simple as just like which, for example, needs to be taught which. Who needs to be taught who. Question words start with WH. That's what I'm going to teach this kiddo. Next word is here. He just wrote an H and gave up, but we know that he's struggling with vowel, consonant, E. And my guess would be he's been trying to memorize all these words. It'll be so great when he learns the heart word approach and learns to attach letters to sounds, because he's not going to have to memorize everything. Parts of these words are phonetic, so it'll be less for him to store in his memory when we teach him the mapping in the one or two parts that are irregular in the word. That gives me an idea of what to start on with high frequency words. And then the last thing I'm going to look at here is the QRI. So you start the QRI by giving them a word list. The student gets a word list. And usually you start at their grade level. So you would start at grade 3 if the student's in grade 3, like in the case here. And you would go up or down based on how the student did. But based on all the assessments, I knew the student was struggling with vowel, consonant, E. And I knew that the letter box wasn't formed yet. He's still flipping PD and Ps. Short O isn't mastered yet, and so I didn't want to start at grade 3. And the student was also not like super sensitive, but it was my first time meeting him. He was pretty shy. I wanted him to feel successful and not feel overwhelmed. So I asked him to start at the very first list, the primer list, and he read with as what. He read they as that and then self-corrected. Place, he said pull, and then plake, and then said place, and then changed it to plain. Where was were. Under was un, and then he got it. Okay, so then I went to the next list. And there's a guide in the QRI. It helps you see where you stop and start. And these I kept to the student list and scored on that. But they do have a teacher form. Actually, I can show you real quick. Sometimes the students, they want to see how they did, and this kiddo is very inquisitive. He's always, can I see how I did? And I feel odd sometimes putting the student in a position where they're seeing their scoring and that sort of a thing. And so that's why I use the student list sometimes, because this one has scoring on it. And I knew this kiddo would want to see that. And I didn't want him to feel bad or to see things like 4th and 5th. And, I wanted to hide that from him. So if he wasn't doing well on a primer, I didn't want him to see that. But usually you hide this part from the student when you're administering. But you can see here it tells you how many they got correct, and it gives you the score. So let's actually look at this for a second. So for our first list here with can, we have 17 words. Got 16 out of 17 correct, which means that it is the independent level. That's what we're seeing here. So this is independent. It was 16. Here we have 3 words wrong. 3 words wrong brings it to a 17. That's an instructional level. So I'm going to do instructional level 17. But I like to go until you see the frustration level. So I kept going. Okay, so this is 1, 2, 3. So we have 17. So that's still the instructional level here. This one, so for sound. Wow. The student's really struggling with decoding. Well, I found his frustration level. That's why I stopped. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 wrong, which means 12 correct. That's the frustration level. So it says in the guide, if it's below 14, you're at the frustration level. Okay. So based on that, I like to do expository. There's narrative and expository. I like to do expository because it's harder, and that's what students read the most when they're in school. 2nd grade and up, it's a lot of expository text. We usually tend to do better in narrative because we're more familiar with narrative, so I want to see how the students do when I test them with expository. Some people like to look at both, but I feel like I get a lot of good information from just doing the one. So because the highest independent list read was a grade 1, I pulled a grade 1 passage, level 1. So that's what you do. You give this assessment to figure out what their highest independent is, and then you give them the level that corresponds with that list to see how they did. So this student had background knowledge. What is air? It's what you breathe. I just take quick notes as they're reading. He formed a prediction. I left it blank, but I remember talking about it with him. We talked a lot about air, actually. He was talking about the beach and stuff. He lives by the beach, so air. So in total, I just did my running record. It was a pretty quick passage. Took him 2 minutes and 13 seconds to read 85 words. There were 14 errors. And then when I calculated the accuracy and automaticity, which I'm not going to do in this video. This could be a separate video because this is a whole thing to do here. But this sheet maps out how to calculate. So he read it with 83% accuracy. His automaticity rate is 29%. That's a big level of concern. But that makes so much sense because based on everything he was doing for his decoding, it's so slow and laborious for him. And so it makes a lot of sense. He's not automatic. It's very clear he's not automatic. He's not identifying words in 3 seconds or less. There's a lot of cognitive energy into letter mapping still and decoding those words. And then his prosody score was an 8, which is also a level of concern. So he still reads in a quiet voice. He reads in 2 to 3 phrases. He's hesitating to sound out words all the time. I mean, that makes sense because he's doing it when he's looking at a single word. So then when they're stranded together, it makes sense that he's going to do it even when they're stranded together. So now the question becomes, so we know his fluency isn't great. So now the question becomes, how's his comprehension? So when he was asked to give an oral retell, he was not able to recall much. He remembered that we can weigh air. But then when I asked him the very specific questions that we have from the QRI, how do we know air is there? How else do we know air is there? He was able to recall without looking back, and he got them all correct. So his comprehension was there. But it was interesting to me, he couldn't generate it himself, but he could pull the information when asked. He could remember it. So maybe he doesn't know how to give a retell. Maybe he doesn't know how to give a summary. That could be something I work on with him. Okay, so that's it for this video. The next video is going to show how to take all this information and form instructional goals for the student. Okay, thanks for watching.